ที่12 สิงหาคมผู้ประกอบการไทยจะต้องดำเนินการนะครับรวมถึงวิธีการในการดำเนินการเฉพาะตัว Declaration of Conformity กับตัว Technical Documentation นะครับรวมถึงไทม์ไลน์ในเรื่องอื่นๆด้วยนะครับที่จะมีผลในระยะต่อไปเพื่อไม่ให้เป็นการเสียเวลานะครับในลำดับแรกนะครับผมขอเรียนเชิญนางกัญจนาพัทรโชคเอกอัครราชทูตณกรุงบรัสเซลส์นะครับกล่าวคำเปิดงานเวบินาร์เรียนเชิญครับ
สวัสดีคุณพี่ก็ต้องขอให้สนใจกิจกรรมกันอย่างล้นหลามมากทราบเมื่อสักครู่จากทางคุณของผมว่ามีผู้ลงทะเบียนเข้าร่วมถึง700 กว่าคนนะคะรวมเป็น400 กว่าบริษัทในประเทศไทยนะคะที่ได้ลงทะเบียนเข้าร่วมเดี๋ยวคงเข้ามากันเรื่อยๆตอนนี้เห็น participants มีอยู่ประมาณ380 คนนะคะก็อันนี้เป็นนิมิตหมายที่ดีที่เห็นได้ชัดว่าผู้ประกอบการไทยมีความตื่นตัวมีความกระตือรือร้นที่จะเรียนรู้แล้วก็ปรับตัวกับกฎระเบียบใหม่ของ EU นะคะซึ่งจะได้ช่วยให้เป็นประโยชน์กับไทยในฐานะที่เป็น early mover อย่างแท้จริงก็โดยเฉพาะอย่างยิ่งตอนนี้ไทยกำลังเจรจา FTA อยู่กับ EU นะคะก็ผ่านไป9 รอบแล้วมีความคืบหน้ามากก็หวังที่จะให้การเจรจาเสร็จสิ้นโดยเร็วก็พูดกันว่าปีนี้ได้ไหมหรือว่าถ้าไม่ได้ปีนี้ก็อาจจะเป็นปีหน้านะคะซึ่งโอกาสทางการค้าขายระหว่างไทยกับ EU ก็จะเพิ่มมากขึ้นเมื่อเรามี FTA นะครับเรื่องเศรษฐกิจหมุนเวียนกฎระเบียบด้านสิ่งแวดล้อมต่างๆแบบนี้เป็นสิ่งที่เราจะต้องเตรียมตัวให้พร้อมเพื่อที่ว่าเมื่อ FTA บังคับใช้แล้วเนี่ยเราก็จะได้ไม่มีอุปสรรคในด้านกฎระเบียบต่างๆมาเป็นตัวที่ทำให้เราไม่สามารถค้าขายใช้ประโยชน์จาก FTA ได้เต็มที่นะคะสถานทูตก็ได้ติดตามแนวโน้มนโยบายของ EU ในด้านเศรษฐกิจหมุนเวียนอย่างใกล้ชิดได้ทำงานร่วมกับพันธมิตรทั้งในไทยทั้งที่กรุงบรัสเซลส์แล้วก็ในประเทศmember state ของ EU ด้วยเพื่อเตรียมความพร้อมของไทยอย่างรอบด้านนะคะมีการจัดการสัมมนาที่ส่งเสริมความตระหนักรู้เกี่ยวกับระบบ PPR กฎระเบียบ ESPR และ PPWR มาโดยตลอดแล้วก็มีการสนับสนุนการพัฒนากฎระเบียบที่เกี่ยวข้องของไทยโดยนำผู้เชี่ยวชาญจากไทยมาศึกษาดูงานที่กรุงบรัสเซลส์อันสุดท้ายก็เมื่อเดือนเมษายนที่ผ่านมาตลอดจนทางกรมยุโรปกระทรวงการต่างประเทศก็ได้มีการจัดเวทีแลกเปลี่ยนระหว่างภาครัฐและภาคเอกชนล่าสุดก็เมื่อวันที่10 กรกฎาคมที่ผ่านมาในเรื่องเศรษฐกิจหมุนเวียนนะคะการสัมมนาในวันนี้ก็เป็นกิจกรรมที่ต่อเนื่องสถานทูตก็ร่วมกันจัดกับ MTech GIZ Thailand EUROPEN แล้วก็บริษัท SGS นะคะเพื่อเสริมสร้างความสามารถของประกอบการของไทยในการดำเนินการตามกฎระเบียบ PPWR ในเชิงเทคนิคซึ่งจะมีผลบังคับใช้ในวันที่12 สิงหาคมนี้นะคะซึ่งก็เรียกว่าเร็วแล้วนะคะ12 สิงหาคมดังนั้นเรื่องที่เราได้เชิญเชี่ยวชาญจากEUROPEN และจาก SGS มาบรรยายในวันนี้ก็คือในเรื่องของการจัดทำ Declaration of Conformity และการจัดทำ Technical Documentation นอกจากนี้สถานทูตยังมีโครงการต่อเนื่องเพื่อสนับสนุนการเตรียมความพร้อมสำหรับการมีบทบังคับใช้ของข้อกำหนดด้านการออกแบบเพื่อ Recycle หรือว่า Design for Recycling ภายใต้ PPWR ด้วยโดยจะสนับสนุนให้ผู้เชี่ยวชาญจากสถาบัน MTech สถาบันพลาสติกและศูนย์เปโตรแบคของจุฬาเข้ารับการอบรมเป็นออดิเตอร์ที่จะสามารถตรวจเงินรับรองความสามารถในการรีไซเคิลบรรจุภัณฑ์เพื่อส่งไป EU ได้ในอนาคตอันนี้ก็ถือเป็นการอำนวยความสะดวกให้กับผู้ประกอบการไทยให้สามารถขอรับการลงตราได้ภายในประเทศเป็นการส่งเสริมการเป็นศูนย์กลางธุรกิจ Testing Inspection and Certification ของไทยภาคด้วยวันที่12 สิงหาคมนี้นะคะผู้ประกอบการไทยต้องพร้อมต่อ PPWR ดิฉันเชื่อมั่นในศักยภาพของผู้ประกอบการไทยในการปรับตัวให้เข้ากับผู้ดำเนินการ แล้วก็สนับสนุนให้ใช้โอกาสนี้ในการสร้างแบรนดิ้งใหม่ให้กับสินค้าและบรรจุภัณฑ์ของไทยว่าสอดคล้องกับข้อกำหนดด้านความยั่งยืนสามารถนำไปใช้ซ้ำและรีไซเคิลได้โดยง่ายให้เกิดการหมุนเวียนของวัตถุดิบรีไซเคิลเพื่อสร้างตลาดใหม่ต่อไปก็ขอให้ใช้ประโยชน์จากการสัมมนาในวันนี้อย่างเต็มที่นะคะก็ขอให้การสัมมนาดำเนินไปโดยราบรื่นมีข้อสักถามอะไรก็สามารถสักถามผู้เชี่ยวชาญได้ค่ะขอบพระคุณมากค่ะ and also thanks to our co-hosts for supporting this event. We hope that Thailand can be the most trusted partners for the EU and that we will be embarking on the journey to implement the PPWR most efficiently. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณค่ะ
ก็ขอบพระคุณท่านทูตนะครับสำหรับคำกล่าวเปิดนะครับก็ในลำดับต่อไปนะครับ May I give the floor to Sevrine Pereira. She's from EUROPEN.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, for the introduction and for having me presenting to you this morning. If you just bear with me for 1 second, I will share my presentation. I will share my entire screen because I can't seem to be able to do otherwise. I hope that will be okay. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, I hope that's okay. All right.
Yes, this look
So
good.
we'll get started there. So good morning, everyone. Please let me know if you can't hear me or if you cannot see my slides at any moment. So very nice to having the chance to talk to you all this morning. I will first, before I start my presentation, briefly introduce EUROPEN and who we are. So EUROPEN is the European Organization for Packaging and the Environment. We are based in Brussels, Belgium, and we basically represent the entire packaging value chain. So amongst our membership, we represent companies, which actually form the majority of our membership, but also some national associations from across the packaging value chain. And we represent all packaging materials, so glass, metal, paper and cardboard, plastics, and wood. Just to show you very concretely who our members are, those are our corporate members. So when I was saying that we represent the value chains, to be more specific, we represent raw material manufacturers, packaging manufacturers, packaging fillers or users, but also label manufacturers and packaging machinery manufacturers. Beyond being active across different packaging materials, our members are also active across different economic sectors, such as the agri-food business, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, detergents, electronic, you name it, it is very wide. And just briefly, these are the national associations that are part of our organization as well in Brussels. Just to clarify, so what we do is that we represent the interests of the industry in Brussels towards key stakeholders, decision makers, EU institutions, and basically work a lot on every legislation that is relevant for those businesses. And so obviously the packaging and packaging waste regulation is a very important one, but also wanted to clarify as a disclaimer for today, I will do my best to navigate and introduce you to the different requirements from the PPWR, our understanding of the requirements and how to best prepare for the upcoming introduction of the new rules. We are not, however, a legal service. That is something that we always underlined, and so obviously we cannot provide any legal interpretation of the text or give you any legal counsel, but I will do my best to show you the elements that we have at hand to help you as well understand how to get prepared. To introduce the topic of the day, the new European packaging legislation, the packaging and packaging waste regulation. Within the packaging sector, we had now for more than 30 years an existing legislative framework in the EU, which was the packaging waste directive. And as you know, this directive was reviewed to transition to a packaging and packaging waste regulation. The regulation aims to apply to all packaging, all types of packaging, meaning that both B2C and B2B packaging are in scope of the new framework. And we always advise to understand a bit more the requirements and how it applies to your businesses to check Article 3 of the regulation, which defines what a packaging is. And you have in the regulation an annex, Annex 1, which also provides an indicative list of examples of what is considered packaging or not instead considered packaging. As it applies to all packaging types, the regulation will apply to all packaging materials as well as to all packaging waste, but without prejudice to another legislation that we have in the EU, that is the Waste Framework Directive, and specific requirements on hazardous waste. We moved, as I said, from a directive to a regulation. What it means, and that is maybe a bit trivial, but we changed the legal instrument, and what it means effectively, and that may be helpful for you as businesses, is that now with the regulation, the new rules will become binding and directly applicable across the entire European Union, meaning that they will not be, with the directive, a need for each member state to transpose the new rules into national law. And so for businesses, this will normally make things easier in the sense that the rules will be more harmonized. That being said, of course, in reality, the text was prepared in such a way that there are several measures that will still be adopted by the different member states. However, there will be a great number of requirements that are not harmonized throughout the EU. So it will be much easier for companies to produce and adapt their packaging, because it should be then the same for all the countries in Europe. On the right side of the screen, you see what we call the key intervention areas, which basically are the areas or the new topics that are being addressed by the regulation. And many of those form a market access condition, meaning that packaging will have to comply with those new requirements in order to be allowed to be placed on the market of the EU. And so these key intervention areas include regulation on substances in packaging, on recyclability, on plastic recycled content, compostability, minimization, reuse as well, labeling, and also a few waste prevention measures. And you have the link on this slide to the full regulation in case you want to consult it in more detail. This is just an illustration. I'm not going to go through the different points, but to show you as well, and we appreciate the extent of the difficulty in the sense that the regulation will basically apply in different steps from 2026. So as it was mentioned already, the regulation will officially start applying from the 12th of August. So the date of application is coming very soon. The regulation was already published last year and entered into force on the 11th of February 2025. But now 12th of August is really the date where the new rules will start applying. The regulation is very complex in the sense that it's a broad framework of obligations with many changes upcoming for industry, of course, and many as well pieces of secondary legislation, as we call them, basically implementing acts or delegated acts still needed to be adopted in order to inform businesses on how to comply with the different requirements. And so businesses will basically have throughout the upcoming years from August onwards to keep track of the new, implementing acts that will be adopted and how the rules will be specified in order to comply with them. It was mentioned by your ambassador just before I took the floor. Obviously, this regulation does have relevance given the trade relationship between Thailand and the EU and the amount of products that you export to Europe. And so obviously, we as with many players around the world, we understand that there is a lot of work to be done, and so obviously that's why we were very happy to answer to this invitation this morning to explain to you indeed what the new rules are and how best to prepare for them. I will do in a moment a deep dive into the requirements, but not all of them, because I think we could easily spend 2, 3, if not more hours together. But just to show you first, a very top level, the key provisions from the PPWR. So I was mentioning first substances in packaging as being one key intervention area. So one of the first requirements that is introduced in Article 5 in relation to substances is the objective to minimize substances in packaging, and in particular substances of concerns, of course. And there is as well through that same article, and that's one of the first requirements to apply from 12th of August this year, a restriction on food contact packaging that contain PFAS above certain given limits, as well as packaging that have a concentration sum of heavy metals above 100 milligram per kilogram, but I'll come back to that. And this requirement also applies from the 12th of August this year. A big pillar of this new regulation is recyclability, because we have new recyclability targets, objectives to comply with. So obviously already via the previous directive, there were a set of recycling targets to be met across all packaging types, and then with specific targets for each type of packaging material. But now we have new requirements that are falling under the responsibility of businesses directly. And the first one is the fact that packaging from 1st January 2030 will have to be recyclable by design in order to be able to be placed on the union market. So the European Commission is currently working on what we call design for recycling criteria that all packaging will have to comply with in order to be allowed on the union market. 5 years later, and this one is quite important, and I'll come back to it as well, is an objective that from 1st January 2035, all packaging, not only being recyclable by design, will also need to be effectively recycled at scale. So we're moving from recyclability by design, so theoretically, if I can put it that way, to an actual effective concrete recycling of the packaging. And within that article around recyclability, which is Article 6, there are also a few elements to introduce restrictions for certain packaging that may not comply with those requirements, but I'll come back to that later. Article 7 of the regulation pertains to recycled content, plastic recycled content, and there we have 2 sets of objectives from 2030 and 2040, mandated that any plastic part in packaging, per packaging type and format, and calculated as an average per manufacturing plant, needs to incorporate recycled content with a set of targets that I'll show you later on. And relevant for you as well, in that article was introduced a mirror clause for recycled plastic that is sourced outside of the EU. We also have an article around compostability, where certain packaging formats are mandated to be industrially compostable, and home composting, in addition to that, can be required by member states on an ad hoc basis if they wish to. And member states also have the possibility to mandate compostability for other types of packaging formats at national level, but this has to be done before August this year. So the timeline is coming to an end soon. Another area of the regulation that's very relevant for you to know is minimization. So we have different articles there, but maybe starting with minimization on the design of packaging. Packaging have to be designed so that the weight and volume of packaging are reduced to the minimum necessary, still to ensure the packaging functionality. And this obligation applies by 1st January 2030. And the European Commission, with the support of standardization experts, will basically establish a list of most common packaging types and formats, and related weight and volume limits that will be defined per each of those packaging type. We have some requirements around reusable packaging. I'll come back to the targets, but just to talk a moment about reusability by design, if I can put it that way. We have in Article 11 of the PPWR several criteria that are listed, and basically a packaging to be considered reusable has to comply with all of these criteria. One of those criteria actually is recyclability or effective recycling, if I can put it that way, at the end of life of the packaging. And this article foresees the definition of a minimum number of rotations for reusable packaging. We also have in the regulation some labeling requirements. So some of the labels are now harmonized and mandatory, and there are also a few harmonized voluntary types of labels that are introduced. And finally, there are a few requirements around waste prevention, falling both on economic operators and EU member states. So to start with, to name the reuse targets that will apply from 1st January 2030 and 1st January 2040 for different packaging types in specific sectors, and I'll come back to that. Another point in relation to minimization, there are some objectives to reduce empty space in e-commerce, transport, and group packaging by 1st January 2030, as well as some actual bans, restrictions of certain packaging types from 1st January 2030. So quite a few things to go through. We won't go through everything in detail, but I will show you still quite a few elements today. And I was mentioning earlier that we have now a very comprehensive frameworks with very clear objectives that as an industry we need to achieve. But just to mention as well, as I was saying, that we are still expecting quite a few texts that will help us as businesses understand how to implement the new rules from the PPWR. And those will basically be developed across the upcoming years. So the regulation provides for a few deadlines in the PPWR, and basically the European Commission is charged to draft those different acts, secondary legislative acts, and basically will then share those draft acts with the EU member states for review and approval, and then industry has also opportunities to be part of the development of those, and will be consulted on quite a few acts. So we estimate the number of secondary acts to be around 30. There are quite a few that are already under development. So the Commission has started already with the support of internal services or consultants to work on those. So just to mention a few areas, labeling is one area where work has advanced quite well, recyclability as well, minimization. There are a few developments upcoming for recycled content because we have some acts expected at the end of the year. So quite a few things, substances in packaging as well has started. And this is, I'll show you at the end, but this is a snapshot from a website that we've created to actually help businesses keep track of development. But I'll show you that in a moment, and you'll have the link through the presentation. Just to mention, and you're probably, for some of you are probably already maybe aware of some of those documents. The European Commission, knowing that the regulatory frameworks is quite complex and new, and as I was saying, a lot of change is to come, and so many things for businesses to adapt to and get prepared, have basically answered some requests from industry to clarify certain aspects of the text, in the sense that some of the definitions are not always very clear for certain actions in the value chain, because the packaging value chain is very complex, or certain requirements were not super clear. So the Commission decided to prepare a legal notice, a guidance document, and you have the link on the slide here. It was published at the end of March, and it's been translated in all EU official languages. And along that guidance document, they have published a frequently asked questions document. The difference between those two is that the legal notice, the guidance, will not be updated, at least not regularly. It's not foreseen for now, whereas the FAQ is meant to be a living document that the European Commission will update regularly as much as they can to introduce maybe new questions that are raised by stakeholders. None of these two documents are legally binding documents, and the Commission is providing interpretation in those documents, but eventually, legally, it's only the EU Court of Justice that can provide interpretation on EU law. However, this document constitutes a useful basis for businesses to get answers to some of the most recurring questions, and also the practice is that very often member states in the EU look up to those kind of documents where they are faced with any unclarities. Now is the time to do a bit more of a deep dive into the requirements. I will go through them. It's a lot of information, which I appreciate. So I will try to be as clear as possible, and then obviously we'll leave some time for us to exchange, and I'll answer any questions that you have on those. So the first one is Article 5. As I was mentioning, we have two key objectives. We have a limitation on the sum of concentrations of heavy metals in packaging that shall not exceed 100 milligram per kilogram, as well as a restriction on food contact packaging containing PFAS in a concentration equal or above the limits that are given in Article 6 of the PPWR. This requirement is applying from the 12th of August. And we also have in Article 5 a mandate from the European Commission, assisted by the European Chemicals Agency, to prepare a report on the presence of substances of concern in packaging and packaging components, to determine whether there are any substances that negatively affect the reuse and recycling of packaging or impact chemical safety. This work is ongoing. The study is at the moment still being done, and basically the outcome of that study could be that the European Commission decides to adopt restrictions on certain substances of concern, either via the REACH restriction process, if some of those substances are found to affecting human health and the environment, and if those substances are found to impact instead reuse and recycling, then the European Commission might decide to restrict those through the design for recycling criteria. Just to mention that the obligations applying on the 12th of August, so in relation to the concentration of heavy metals and PFAS in food contact packagings, are market access condition, and that they will have to be subject to a demonstration of compliance via the Declaration of Conformity and technical documentation. This is the part on recyclability. So as I was saying, we have two key objectives. From 1st January 2030, all packaging shall be designed for material recycling in line with design for recycling criteria that are at the moment being developed by the European Commission and are due to be adopted via delegated acts by the 1st January 2028. And 5 years following the 2030 deadline, from January 2035, all packaging will have to be effectively recycled at scale. There is a definition of packaging waste recycled at scale in Article 3, and you see it on the slide here. And basically what it means, apart from wood, which has another target, it means that the materials have at union level to reach a recycling target of 55%. The Article 6 is also providing that from 1st January 2030, packaging will not be allowed on the union market unless it is recyclable within grades A, B, or C. And from 1st January 2038, packaging that fall within the grade C will no longer be allowed on the EU market. So you will probably ask me, what are grades A, B, and C? You see the thresholds here on the right side of the slide, and they are also listed in detail in the annex of the PPWR. A grade A is a packaging with a recyclability performance higher or equal to 95%, B is higher or equal to 80%, and C higher or equal to 70%, meaning that from 1st January 2038, the packaging that falls within that threshold, higher or equal to 70%, but still below 80%, will be out of the market. And the European Commission will adopt a secondary legislation as well to translate the compliance with the design for recycling criteria into the actual grade, so that businesses know exactly where the packaging falls in terms of those grades. Something that is brought forward by this article as well is related to the modulation of what we call extended producer responsibility fees. So those fees that businesses have to pay for the packaging that they place on the market to handle the end of life of packaging and the waste management cost of that packaging. And basically the PPWR now say that those fees will be modulated according with that recyclability from performance. What it means essentially, it's an incentive for businesses to try and ensure that the packaging has the higher performance grade possible. Although further details will come via secondary legislation, we assume the logic is that the higher the grade, the less fees basically businesses will have to pay. Just to tell you briefly that in terms of the recyclability requirements, in terms of compliance, this is also a criteria that is a market access condition. And so compliance of packaging with the requirements will have to be demonstrated in technical documentation. So Declaration of Conformity and technical documentation. The compliance assessment of packaging against the recyclability requirements need to include all integrated components of a packaging. And a separate recyclability assessments will have to be done for integrated components that may be separated through mechanical stress during transportation and sorting, or for each separate component in a packaging. Meaning that if you have a packaging unit in which you have some separate components, those will need to be subject to their own recyclability performance assessment and their own documentation. You might ask me, what are integrated components, separate components? And just to let you know that there are definitions provided in the text in Article 3, paragraph 43 and 44 of the PPWR. I'm not going to go through it in detail as an interest for time, but there are a few elements in Article 6 around innovative packaging. And so providing, some flexibility and room for innovative packaging materials to still be created and scaled on the market. And this is all in Article 6, paragraph 9, if I'm not mistaken. And there are also a few derogations from Article 6. So Article 6 does not apply to a number of types of packaging. That includes immediate packaging of medicinal products for both human and veterinary use. It does not apply to contact-sensitive packaging of medical devices, of infant formula and follow-on formula, of processed cereal-based food and baby food, and of food for special medical purposes. It doesn't apply to outer packaging of medicinal products either, to packaging used to transport dangerous goods, and it does not apply to sales packaging made of lightweight wood, cork, textile, rubber, ceramic, porcelain, and wax. The European Commission still has a mandate in the PPWR to review these derogations by 1st January 2035. And so this list might in the future change, but for the moment, all these types of packaging and materials are derogated from the obligations of Article 6. Article 7 is about recycled content. So as I was saying, by 1st January 2030 and 1st January 2040, we have set of recycled content targets applying to any plastic part of packaging that will then have to contain a minimum percentage of recycled content recovered from post-consumer plastic waste. It is to be noted that the requirement applies to any plastic part of packaging above 5% of the total weight of the whole packaging unit. So if you have a packaging with the plastic part that is below, representing below 5% of the total weight of the packaging unit, then this plastic part is exempted from the requirements. You see here on the slide the minimum percentages mandated by the article. They are to be calculated as an average per manufacturing plant and year and apply per packaging type and format. And those are listed in Annex 2 of the regulation. And you see that we have different sets of targets. We have contact sensitive packaging made from PET as the major component. We have some targets applying to contact sensitive packaging made from plastic other than PET instead. Single-use plastic beverage bottles, and then other types of plastic packaging with some quite ambitious targets, especially when it comes to contact sensitive packaging. By the end of this year, the European Commission is mandated to adopt implementing act to establish the methodology to calculate and verify the percentage of recycled content in packaging, possibly including third-party audits, and economic operators will have to comply with it by 1st January 2029 or 2 years after the methodology's adoption. Work is ongoing on that one. Actually, just yesterday, the Commission already set up a public page where stakeholders will be consulted. The consultation has not yet started. We do not know whether the Commission will be on time, but just to mention actually in brackets that it applies to that requirement, but to many in the regulation that there is very often a deadline for businesses to comply with a certain requirement. However, if the Commission is late in adopting those acts, there is usually an equivalent period of time to delay as well the application of the requirement on businesses. So if the Commission, let's say, does not adopt the acts on latest 31st December 2026, and they adopt it, I don't know, let's imagine theoretically in February next year, you will still have the same buffer, the same time period to prepare for compliance. By 1st January 2028, the European Commission will assess the need for derogation from the 10 and 35% recycled content targets of 2030 and might decide to also review some derogations, but I'll show you the derogations in a moment. And there is also an entire part where the Commission will also review the state of developments of bio-based plastic packaging and where appropriate present a legislative proposal to introduce targets in relation to Article 7, but using bio-based plastic feedstock, so giving the possibility to businesses to reach the targets not by using plastic recycled content, but bio-based plastic. This, however, is not coming soon, so for the moment we don't have any insights into whether the Commission will indeed adopt such a proposal, but just to mention it for your information. I'll start with the right side. You see here the derogations to Article 7. Those derogations are actually quite similar to the ones of Article 6. So the article does not apply to immediate and outer packaging of medicinal products for both human use or veterinary use, contact-sensitive plastic packaging of medical devices, compostable plastic packaging, of course, packaging used for transporting dangerous goods, packaging of supplies, components in immediate packaging components for the manufacturing of medicinal products, food contact plastic packaging in case recycled content poses a threat to human health and results in non-compliance with the general EU food contact materials regulation. And as I said earlier, Article 7 does not apply to any plastic part that represent less than 5% of the total weight of the given packaging unit. The article also includes some safety and review clauses, so safety clause, in order to ensure that the Commission, if needed, is empowered to adopt an act to adjust the level of the recycled content targets, where maybe there's a lack of availability of recycled materials or excessive prices of specific recycled plastic that would make compliance with the target extremely difficult for businesses. And there are some review clauses. So the Commission is due in beginning of 2032 to present a report that will review the situation and evaluate the feasibility of the 2040 targets, and also to review the situation regarding the use of recycled packaging materials in packaging other than plastic. So we're talking about recycled content outside of plastic for possibly other materials, but that will come at a later stage. Just to mention the requirements on minimization and excessive packaging, I will differentiate here the two in the sense that there are requirements under Article 10 and Article 24 of the PPWR. Article 10 is an article that is amongst the different requirements that are forming a market access condition, and meaning that for Article 10, economic operators will need to prove, again, via a declaration of conformity and technical documentation, that the packaging is indeed in conformity with Article 10 prior to placing the packaging on the market. Article 24 instead obviously is also a legal requirement applying to businesses, but is not part of those articles that are subject to the conformity assessment procedure. And I'll show you again those details later on, but just to mention the difference between the two, I still put them in the same bucket because they belong to the same type of family of requirements. So to start with Article 10, by 1st January 2030, packaging will have to be designed so that the weight and volume of packaging is reduced to the minimum necessary still to ensure the functionality of packaging. And I was telling you earlier that the Commission is working with the EU standardization organization to prepare or update harmonized standards to establish a methodology to calculate and measure packaging minimization, and we'll also come up with that list and related limits for most common packaging types and formats, and this work is already ongoing. This minimization requirement under Article 10 applies to all types of packaging across the board, so quite important to note. Instead, however, Article 24 only applies, and I'll start with the one in the middle, to group transport and e-commerce packaging when it comes to the 50% empty space space ratio. So by 1st January 2030, or 3 years from the entry into force of the relevant act, a maximum 50% empty space ratio will be allowed in group transport and e-commerce packaging. And by beginning of 2028, the European Commission will establish a methodology to calculate that empty space in packaging. And work on this has already started. The European Commission is being assisted by a consultant working on a proposal for the methodology as we speak. So this is only applying to group transport and e-commerce packaging, but under Article 24, we also have a requirement applying to sales packaging specifically, which states that by 12 February 2028, empty space in sales packaging is to be reduced to the minimum necessary, still ensuring the packaging functionality. So you see that with group transport and e-commerce packaging, we have a tangible threshold of a maximum 50% empty space ratio, but in sales packaging is a more overarching objective. And an important detail to note as well is that any space filled with material in the packaging, such as paper cuttings or bubble wrap or sponge filler, is still considered empty space. Very briefly, this is the article I was mentioning earlier, Article 11, reusable packaging. Those are the different criteria that packaging need to fulfill in order to be considered reusable. This article actually already entered into force or applied with the entry into force of the regulation in February 2025. And by 12 February next year, the Commission will adopt a delegated act that will establish the minimum number of rotations for reusable packaging, and work on this is already ongoing. These are the labeling requirements from Article 12. So we have some sorting instructions mandated for consumer sorting. These will be harmonized throughout Europe. The European Commission has already started working on those. The system will be based on pictogram, and the idea is that you will have on packaging pictograms matching pictograms placed on waste receptacles. As I said, work is ongoing. The act defining those different labels is applying from 12 of August 2028, and the Commission was meant to adopt it by 12 of August this year, 2026. We anticipate that there's a tiny bit of delay with that one, but hopefully the act should be adopted in the autumn. But as I was saying earlier, in any case, if the Commission is late, you will not have to comply from 12 of August 2028, but from 2 years from the moment of entry into force of this act. There is also mandated under PPWR a harmonized reusable packaging label. So all reusable packaging will have to bear a label informing users that the packaging is reusable, and further information on the reusability will have to be made available through a QR code. And we also have a voluntary label to indicate recycled or bio-based content in packaging that companies are free to use if they wish to, and they are not obliged, but if they do want to indicate on pack the amount of recycled content or bio-based content, they will have to do so according to a methodology harmonized at EU level. We also have a few other types of labels that are mandated by the regulation. I'm not going to talk to you about deposit and return systems because that's probably less relevant. Same for extended producer responsibility markings. But just to let you know that the Article 12 also put forward a marking for packaging containing substances of concern. And so this is also being developed by the Commission. And that Article 12 provides some flexibility. So first, there are some derogations that you can see on the slide, but also in case the packaging, due to the nature of the packaging or the size of the packaging, cannot bear a label, then that label can be affixed on group packaging when it's needed. And this article also foresees a period of exhaustion of stocks for packaging that are already placed on the market. Article 25 of the PPWR puts forward several bans. So those are packaging restrictions that are listed in detail in Annex 5 of the regulation, and those bans apply from the 1st of January 2030. And the European Commission is currently working on a guideline document that they are due to adopt by 12 February next year, to basically give examples of the types of packaging that do fall in the scope of those restrictions. You see most of them are actually concerning single-use plastic packaging in given sectors. I'm not going to go through the list in full detail, but you can find it in Annex 5 of the regulation. And just to be noted that Article 67 of the PPWR also amends the Single-Use Plastics Directive, which is another piece of legislation and introduces a few additional bans of certain types of packaging. The reuse targets of the PPWR are introduced in Article 29 of the regulation. They actually concern a few types of packaging. They concern transport packaging, and you have the full list in the first line here of the types of formats that are subject to the targets. The targets apply from 1st January 2030 and shall endeavor to be met by the 1st January 2040. We also have some reuse targets for alcoholic packaging of alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages, with a few sets of derogation that you can see in the table. I'm only spinning up a bit so that I can show you and take a bit more time for the conformity part. Just on this slide, this does not apply to economic operators directly, but I thought it's quite relevant to show it to you because the regulation introduces in Article 43 a few requirements when it comes to preventing packaging waste, and a few obligations falling on member states, but any obligation falling on member states, usually then at national level, is applying in turn to the economic operator. So Article 43 mandates that each member state shall reduce the packaging waste generated per capita in the member state as compared to the packaging waste generated per capita in 2018. By at least 5% by 2030, 10% by 2035, and 15% by 2040, which are quite significant targets. And basically, member states can take measures to additional measures beyond those mandated by the regulation to achieve those targets. So they can, for example, adopt measures such as specific economic instruments, or measures to provide incentives for the application of the waste hierarchy, or other appropriate measures and instruments that they deem necessary to reach those waste reduction targets. And they may also introduce packaging waste prevention measures exceeding those targets that you see on the left side in the purple box. The text also says that each member state shall endeavor to reduce the quantity of plastic packaging waste generated, and by 12 February 2032, the Commission will review the waste reduction targets and assess the need to include specific targets for certain packaging materials. At the moment, it's applying horizontally, it's a waste reduction target, but the Commission might decide to intervene on specific materials. Just to mention briefly, I was talking at the beginning about the concept of extended producer responsibility, which is where it's the polluter pay principle, as we call it as well, whereby a producer has to pay a fee in each member state where they place packaging or packaged product to basically handle the cost of waste management of that packaging. Extended producer responsibility organizations were already mandated in the past and were existed through the Packaging Waste Directive. in Europe, basically since the end of 2024, we have an obligation to have EPR schemes established for all types of packaging in all member states. However, the regulation is seeking more harmonization and will notably create what we call register of producers, and packaging producers or their producer responsibility organization or their authorized representative will have to register in the register of producer in each member state where they place packaging or packaged products for the first time. They will basically have to register in those register of producers. There is an act that is mandated in the regulation for the Commission to adopt. The deadline for the Commission to adopt that act was 12 February 2026. There is some delay. Actually, the European Commission will discuss this act with member states tomorrow, and so we anticipate that it should normally be adopted soon. And from the moment the act is adopted, member states will have 18 months to establish the national register of producers at national level. And just putting here a few information about what EPR is without going through a lot of detail, because you will get this presentation as well and can consult the different elements. But we do have some resources on our website to understand a bit more what EPR is about. We just launched a study that will explain that in simple terms and how it works, and what are the different schemes like, who are the main actors and operators. So I invite you to consult those when you have a moment. And just to let you know, in brackets, that we have another legislative initiative that is expected in September, normally to be confirmed, that is called the Circular Economy Act, which is an initiative where the EU basically wants to boost its circularity and ensuring that we have more recycled material retained in our economy very generally, and extended producer responsibility will be a pillar of that initiative in the sense that EPR is really an important leverage to boost collection, sorting and recycling of packaging. So just in brackets, if you're interested, I can tell you more later on. So now I wanted to take the next 10-15 minutes to talk to you about conformity and preparedness, so how you can actually get ready for the application of the new rules. Now I've presented you in a bit of detail the different requirements, although this is yet not exhaustive. I really invite you to consult the regulation in detail if you haven't done so already. But this section will be about what you need to do effectively as businesses now to get prepared for the application of the new rules from 12th of August onwards. A bit like I was saying at the beginning of the presentation, a disclaimer that the final interpretation of the regulation lies with the European Court of Justice, and that the enforcement of the regulation is the responsibility of national competent authorities. So each member state was due actually by summer last year to name a competent authority at national level, which is responsible for enforcing the rules. That's typically how it happens in the EU with such legislation. And so inviting companies to always refer to the text of the PPWR, to double check the requirements and what needs to be done, and also, of course, obviously, to get any additional counsel as necessary. Maybe to start with, before we talk a little bit about the Declaration of Conformity and so on, an important starting point is always to go back to the definitions. So all key definitions are provided in Article 3 of the regulation, and we really see, given the complexity of our businesses and value chains, it is sometimes a bit difficult to understand who you are. I'll just take a bit of water, sorry. And so I just put on that slide some key definitions actually that you might find relevant. Yes,
Excuse
sorry.
me, Sevrine. Could you
Yes.
speak slow? Reduce your speed a little bit.
Yes,
It's
no
a little
problem.
bit
Sorry.
sorry.
A bit fast for interpretation, no problem. Sorry about that. So those are some key definitions that I believe should be relevant for you. And so really I invite you to consult those to understand where you sit in the value chain and who you are exactly. So the first relevant one is the definition of manufacturer. And this one is really key because the manufacturer is basically, in most cases, the one that is legally responsible for the conformity of packaging. And so a manufacturer is any natural or legal person that manufactures packaging or packaged product. However, where subject to point B, where a natural or legal person has packaging or packaged product designed or manufactured under its own name or trademark, regardless of whether any other visible trademark on the packaging or on the packaged product is visible, the manufacturers means that natural or legal person. So meaning that if you do not, yourself manufacture the packaging, but maybe you order that packaging from a supplier, but eventually your name or your trademark appears on the packaging, you are understood to be the manufacturer. And there is an exception to that rule for micro enterprises. And basically for micro enterprises, it is actually the supplier of packaging to that micro enterprises that is instead the manufacturer. The definition of producer is also very relevant because of, in particular, the extended producer responsibility obligations that I was showing you earlier that will basically define who is subject to EPR. And so I put the two sub-paragraphs here on the slide that are mostly relevant for you. I'm not going to read through them now, but invite you to indeed consult them. The supplier, in the sense of the regulation, is any natural or legal person that supplies packaging or packaging material to a manufacturer. An importer is a natural or legal person established within the union that places packaging from a third country on the market. And an authorized representative is actually, and we'll go back to that, is a natural or legal person established in the union that has received a written mandate from the manufacturer to act on that manufacturer's behalf in relation to specific tasks with regards to the manufacturer's obligation under the regulation. What this means effectively, and maybe some of you are already appointing authorized representative, is that for companies that are not established in the union, you have the possibility to appoint a natural or a legal person that is instead established in the EU to represent you and to basically carry your mandate as a manufacturer with you. So not doing the work for you, but basically being your person of contact, let's say, with the competent authorities, with the enforcement authorities, and able to represent you physically in the EU. And I forgot to mention the distributor, which is any natural or legal person in the supply chain other than the manufacturer or importer that makes packaging available on the market. So very key definition to keep in mind. So when it comes to proof of compliance, just to repeat that compliance of packaging with Articles 5 to 12 is a market access condition. So compliance with packaging with these articles has to be ensured and demonstrated via a conformity assessment procedure prior to making packaging available on the market. So manufacturers and importers have to carry a conformity assessment procedure and draw up the required declaration of conformity and technical documentation. You have, and I'll come back to that, the details of how to do that conformity assessment procedure and also a template for the declaration of conformity in Annex 7 and 8 of the regulation. It is important to remember that the declaration of conformity and technical documentation need to be kept for 5 years from the date the packaging was placed on the market for single-use packaging, and for reusable packaging for 10 years from the date the packaging was placed on the market. To be noted as well that when packaging or a packaged product is subject to other union acts that require as well a declaration of conformity, you can create a single EU declaration of conformity. So to combine them together, not to have different declarations of conformity. And there is also an important requirement when it comes to the marking of packaging, in the sense that manufacturers need to ensure that the packaging bears a type, a batch, or a serial number, or another element that allows basically the identification of packaging, and that is for enforcement purposes. if the size or the nature of the packaging does not allow for you to introduce a type, a batch, or a serial number, or another element of identification on the packaging, then the required information can be provided in a document that accompanies the packaged product. And manufacturers shall indicate on the packaging or on a data carrier the name, registered trade name, or registered trademark, as well as the postal address at which they can be contacted. These are the annexes that I was just mentioning a moment ago. So Annex 7 and Annex 8. So Annex 7 provides the detail of the conformity assessment procedures, give you some elements on the internal production control that you need to carry. Sorry. As well as what the technical documentation should include. It provides a bit of language as well in terms of manufacturing to say that the manufacturers need to take all the measures necessary so that the manufacturing process and the monitoring of compliance is done. It also names the Declaration of Conformity and the fact that the manufacturer needs to drop a Declaration of Conformity for each packaging type, together with technical documentation for 5 or 10 years, depending whether it's single-use packaging or reusable packaging, at the disposal of national authorities. This is an important element because you have to know basically that you do not have to send your declaration of conformity or your technical documentation proactively to any authorities, but you need to keep them in your system for that amount of time. So 5 years for single-use packaging, or 10 years for reusable packaging, so that eventually if a national authority wants to check the conformity of the packaging, they can do so and you have the documentation available to show them. And the conformity assessment procedure recalls what I was telling you earlier, that manufacturers' obligation can actually be fulfilled by its authorized representative. So a representative that you would appoint to represent you in the EU on your behalf, and basically that authorized representative would have to keep your documentation, your declaration of conformity and so on, and being a point of contact with the national competent authorities. And you have in Annex 8 the template that is provided for the Declaration of Conformity. So it basically gives you the different elements that need to be included in the Declaration of Conformity, including the unique identification of the packaging, the name and address of the manufacturer or of the authorized representative, and a few other elements, and this needs to be signed. Just to show you, because that will be quite relevant for you as well. Obviously, many of you probably do not have an authorized representative or a legal representation in the union, but obviously the role of importers in this case is very relevant. And so the importers, as you remember from the definition, established in the union and basically importing products from, or packaged products rather, from outside of the EU. Well, before placing packaging on the market, the importer needs to ensure that the conformity assessment procedure, so meaning the declaration of conformity and technical documentation, has been drawn up by the manufacturer, that the packaging is labeled in accordance with Article 12, that the packaging is accompanied by all required documents, and that the manufacturer has complied with its obligation under Article 15, which relates to the conformity assessment procedure. The importer shall indicate on the packaging their name and registered trademark or trade name, as well as the postal address, and where available, the electronic means of communication where they can be contacted. And the importer will need to keep a copy of the Declaration of Conformity and technical documentation also for 5 to 10 years, meaning that whenever you do export products to the Union and work with an importer, if you do not sell directly to the consumer, basically they will be asking you for your declaration of conformity and your technical documentation so that instead they can also be compliant with the regulation. I'm not going to take a lot of time for the last few slides, just a few minutes to show you. So who's responsible for compliance? I think by now you have understood from the presentation that it is the manufacturer that is responsible for compliance of packaging under the regulation. But just to mention, because this is a question that comes back actually quite often, in the end, you know, the compliance of industry with the regulation is really a supply chain, a value chain effort, in the sense that manufacturers will, in many cases, be the packaging filler, so the user of packaging or the brand, however you call it. And basically, like many of you here probably today, you're not always in control with the manufacturing of the actual packaging. Probably you give some guidelines and direction to your supplier in terms of what you need to pack your product, but you do not have the full insight on you know, the technicalities of the manufacturing of that packaging. And so just to tell you that the suppliers have to support you in that process, and Article 16 in particular provide some obligations on suppliers to provide the manufacturer with all the information and document necessary for the manufacturer to demonstrate the conformity of the packaging and packaging materials. So we always have, I mean, at the moment, we sometimes have questions that from manufacturers that they struggle to get the necessary information from their supplier. And so we always recall that this is a value chain effort, and the suppliers need to make sure that they help their customers to prepare for compliance as well by providing them with the necessary documentation. The scope, yes, the scope of the conformity assessment procedure is the following. We've mentioned it a few times already. So compliance of packaging with Article 5 to 12 have to be demonstrated via the Declaration of Conformity and accompanying technical documentation. But just to flag two additional articles from the PPWR that may not apply to you, but still worth noting. And those are Article 14 on environmental claims and Article 26 on reusable packaging, which also provides for some elements when relevant to be provided as part of the conformity assessment procedure. What to include in the technical documentation and by when. So I was telling you that Annex 7 on the conformity assessment procedure provides you a full list of what technical documentation shall contain. Important to note, wherever applicable, and at least the following elements. So wherever applicable can suggest that you do not have to provide all these elements all the time. It's really depending on, you know, the type of packaging or packaged product and the situation that you're in. But still, this list provides a very good indication of what you need to prepare as part of your technical documentation. Unfortunately, there are no templates or existing, you know, documents that you can use as a basis to prepare your technical documentation. But our advice, as always, is just to do the best that you can and be as detailed as possible in case you do receive questions from competent authorities. And from which dates companies have to carry out the conformity assessment procedure? Well, this starts from the 12th of August 2026, because this is where the regulation will start applying. So obviously, you do have to show compliance of packaging with the requirements that do apply on the 12th of August. You cannot realistically be asked, for example, to prove compliance with the recyclability requirements when the first obligation only kicks in 2030, and we are missing a lot of secondary asks, but so everything will be done, you know, progressively. And from the 12th of August, you need to make sure that any product that you place on the EU market after this date is basically ready with this declaration of conformity and technical documentation, showing that it's compliant in particular with the requirements of Article 5. So you remember the concentration limit for heavy metals, and when it comes to food contact packaging, the PFAS one. The manufacturer's information I was mentioning earlier, just to let you know, again, that there is a bit of flexibility. So manufacturers, as I was saying, need to ensure that the packaging bears a type, batch, or serial number or another element that allows the identification. But where the size or the nature of the packaging does not allow you to put that on pack, the required information can be provided in the document accompanying the packaged product. And the manufacturer shall indicate as well on the packaging or on a QR code or another data carrier their name, registered trade name or trademark, and postal address, and where available the electronic means of communications by which they can be contacted. But if this is not possible to do on pack, the required information can be provided as part of information through the QR code that are mandated in Article 12. So you do have some flexibility there if you cannot place the marked information directly on pack. The Declaration of Conformity needs to be maintained up to date. So there are limited elements present in the PPWR to clarify how so, but Article 39 does mention that it needs to be continuously updated, and essentially manufacturers must ensure generally that the series production of packaging remain in conformity with the PPWR, and they must consider if changes in packaging design or in the characteristics of packaging have occurred, and then adapt the different technical documentation. And just to mention, because this is a question that came back all the time in terms of the Declaration of Conformity and what is the unique identification number, and do we need to do a Declaration of Conformity for each packaging or each component of packaging? So the text clarifies that first, we're not talking about components of the packaging, but at the level of the unit. And the European Commission in the FAQ that you see here on the slide basically clarified that the Declaration of Conformity should be drafted at the level where packaging has the same characteristic of view of the applicable requirements of the packaged products. And so if the product differ, a manufacturer should not draft a single Declaration of Conformity for all packaging, packaging placed on the market. But if, for example, and they use the example of bottles, if you have you place on the market some bottles that are in different sizes, and maybe the product inside that bottle is different, but still the technical characteristic of that bottle are the same, then you can draft a single Declaration of Conformity for all those bottles. You have some elements in the text as well in terms of how to identify packaging, just to mention, and I said it a few times when we talk about the batch or the serial number or identification number to be marked on packaging. It's not all of them, it's either of them. So you choose really the mean of identification that is best. And when it comes to the Declaration of Conformity, the regulation does not define the unique identification of the packaging, but just to share that many of the companies that we represent actually take the approach of the SKU. And I'm just going to skip that. This I mentioned already, but you'll have the text as least. It's what I was mentioning when it comes to a packaged product being subject to another obligation of Declaration of Conformity via another legislation. You can combine the Declarations of Conformity. And I'm finalizing then my presentation here before we move to Q&A, just to mention the different resources that we have available to you. Obviously, you'll receive this slide deck, which is quite detailed purposely, so the slides look horrendous, but at least you have a lot of elements to read through afterwards. But we have more available to you on our website. Maybe to start with the PPWR guidebook. The PPWR guidebook is an online interactive questionnaire that you can fill in with top-level information, and none of the data that you put in the questionnaire is saved. So this is really respecting the confidentiality of your information, and basically as you enter some very basic information on the type of business that you're in, the type of packaging or packaged products that you produce, then the questionnaire will generate a top-level summary of the obligations applying to you, as well as the derogations that you might benefit from. We also have our so-called PPWR survival guide, which is a quite comprehensive presentation that looks very much like what I presented to you today, but gives you a snapshot of the key obligations of the PPWR. And we also recently launched a PPWR conformity assessment toolkits with a few materials to help you prepare indeed for conformity with the new rules, as well as, and that's the one I was showing you at the very start of this session, our PPWR implementation tracker, which will help you keep an eye on the development of secondary legislation of the PPWR. And I will stop here. Sorry, I took a bit more time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you so much, Sevrine. This was like very comprehensive presentation. I think like we learned a lot today. And then if anyone has question, you can raise your hand, and then I will call your name and you may ask. We will take 4 or 5 questions first, and then we'll let Sevrine like answer all together. Anybody on the floor like to ask the questions?มีท่านใดต้องการจะสอบถามยกมือได้เลยนะครับกดตรง raise hand ที่เป็นตัวมือด้านล่างได้เลยนะครับแล้วเดี๋ยวโอเค we have one for now ถามเป็นภาษาไทยก็ได้นะครับเดี๋ยวล่างจะแปลให้ okay we have คุณอัญชลี
คุณเพชรประกายค่ะ is the first one
ครับ
คุณเพชรประกาย can now ask the questions
เหมือนคุณเพชรประกายมือลงไปแล้วนะครับตอนนี้มีคุณอัญชลีคุณริกคุณสุภาษิตาคุณตูนนะครับขอ5 ท่านแรกก่อนนะครับคุณอัญชลีครับ
คุณอัญชลี you can open the mic yes
ต้องอันมิวต์ให้ด้วยครับเข้าใจว่าล็อกไว้ครับแอดมิน
ได้หรือยังคะ can you
ผมยังเห็นเป็นล็อกอยู่นะครับ
ตอนนี้เป็น panelist แล้วค่ะcan ask question directly can open the mic by yourself and ask question directly โอเคถ้าไม่อย่างนั้นขอเป็นคุณฤทธิ์นะคะ
ครับคุณฤทธิ์เชิญพูดได้เลยครับคุณฤทธิ์อันมิวต์แล้วเชิญพูดได้เลยนะครับถ้ายังไม่ขอเป็นคุณสุภาษิตาครับแอดมินช่วยทำให้คนที่ยกมือขึ้นมาอยู่เป็น panelist หมดเลยได้ไหมครับคุณสุภาษิตาครับคุณทวินครับ
สวัสดีครับได้ยินเสียงไหมครับ
ได้ยินครับเชิญเลยครับ
โอเคสวัสดีครับผมทวินนะครับจากไทยโพลีเอทิลีนนะครับผมเป็นผู้ผลิตเม็ดพลาสติกนะครับจากไทยแล้วก็ส่งออกไปที่ยุโรปคำถามผมจะเป็นคำถามที่เกี่ยวกับการทำเอกสาร DoC นะครับเนื่องจากเราขายเม็ดพลาสติกไปเนี่ยเราก็จะมีบรรจุภัณฑ์ไปด้วยนะครับบรรจุภัณฑ์มีตั้งแต่หลายแบบนะครับมีตั้งแต่เป็นถุงพลาสติกขนาด25 กิโลกรัมคือใส่เม็ดพลาสติกลงไป25 กิโลกรัมนะครับแล้วก็ถุงบิ๊กแบกที่ใส่เม็ดพลาสติกลงไป750 กิโลกรัมทีนี้ในถุงแต่ละถุงก็ยังมีพาเลตแล้วก็มีชิงแรปหรือว่าแรปฟิล์มนะครับทีนี้เวลาเราทำเอกสาร DoC เมื่อสักครู่นี้ครับ requirement บอกว่าต้องทำให้เหมาะสมกับแต่ละชนิดของแต่ละบรรจุภัณฑ์ใช่ไหมครับทีนี้เราก็ต้องมีเนื้อหาอยู่ให้ครบทั้ง5รายการ ตั้งแต่ SOC จนมาถึงอะไรนะlabeling นะครับ ทีนี้คำถามคือถุงที่ว่าของผมเนี่ยครับมันจัดอยู่เป็น primary packaging หรือ transport packaging ครับจะได้ทำข้อมูลให้เหมาะสมตาม5 ข้อ 8 ข้อที่ว่าเนี่ยครับ
โอเคครับ this is the first question I'll take a couple more โอเคเดี๋ยวคุณตูนครับ
ครับสวัสดีครับผมจากบริษัทเซาแลนด์นะครับทางบริษัทผมนะครับเป็นบริษัทที่ส่งในส่วนของตัวยางแท่งนะครับซึ่งก็จะส่งไปที่มีคัสเตอร์ที่เป็นบริษัทนำเข้าที่เป็นบริษัทล้อยางทีนี้เราก็จะส่งตัวผลิตภัณฑ์ของเราทีนี้ด้วยตัวผลิตภัณฑ์ของเราครับก็จะมีการบรรจุลงในมีจำนวนก้อนนะครับแล้วก็มีการหุ้มด้วยชิงแรปนะครับแล้วก็จะมีแผ่นรองนะครับแล้วก็จะบรรจุลงพาเลตอย่างนี้ครับถือว่าเป็น1 SKU ก็คือจะเป็น1ตัวชุดกลุ่มผลิตภัณฑ์คำถามของผมนะครับคืออยากจะทราบว่าถ้าเป็นในลักษณะอย่างนี้DoC ครับหรือ Technical Report โดยเฉพาะ DoC ครับที่จะต้อง issue ออกไปเนี่ยจะ issue ออกไปเนี่ยตามประเภทของผลิตภัณฑ์ที่ถูกส่งออกไปเป็นหนึ่งชุดผลิตภัณฑ์ใช่ไหมครับอันนี้ผมเข้าใจถูกไหมครับประมาณนี้หรือว่าต้องแยกออกมาเป็นตัวแต่ละ component ของตัวแพ็กเกจเลยอย่างเช่นชิงแรป1 ชุดตัวแผ่นรอง1 ชุดพาเลตอะไรอย่างเงี้ยประมาณนี้ครับขอบคุณครับ
Okay, I think the questions are quite similar. So I'll take one more. I'll draw back to you. Okay. ขอบคุณจริญญา
Hello ค่ะ Jarinya from hi Jarinya from Coviso for our company is exports for the polymer to EU. I think my question is similar for the first person. Yeah, the first it's about the transportation packaging how we can compile for.
Okay, so I think they have like quite similar questions. Maybe I will give the floor back to Sevrine first to answer to this question. Sevrine, please.
Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for your questions and interest. Indeed, what I could hear is that those are quite similar questions in terms of how you should prepare your declaration of conformity, whether you need to do it for each component, whether you need to separate actually the DoC according to the products that you export to the EU. So first to mention, and you will find that in the slides that I shared with you again earlier, the DoC is meant to target the packaging unit, and so not components within a packaging unit. However, and as we saw from the elements clarified by the Commission in the frequently asked questions and answers, it is understood that the DoC should be drawn up for similar packaging types and formats. So they have to answer the same, technical characteristics. So if you take, there was one example that you brought up, that you export pallets and shrink wraps, for example. These normally should be subject to separate declarations of conformities because they are different types of packaging. And so they will be subject to different type of technical documentation. Just to recall, the type of technical documentation that, where applicable, needs to be developed includes a general description of the packaging and its intended use, the conceptual design, manufacturing drawings and materials of components, descriptions and explanations that are necessary to understand those same technical drawings, a list of harmonized standards or common specification where applicable, and a qualitative description of how the assessment of the compliance was provided, as well as, where applicable, test reports. And so typically, if you look at these elements and the type of technical documentations that is expected, it does indicate to you that if you take a pallet and a shrink wraps, they will have different intended uses. The descriptions of that packaging will be different. Any drawings of those packaging will also look different. And so per se, they are subject to different declarations of conformities and technical documentation. I'm just recalling the example that the European Commission has used in the FAQ, where they were saying, however, that there is a way to make your life easier, if I can put it that way. They were using the example of bottles. So let's imagine you export to the EU some plastic bottles filled, let's say, with products. Some of them are filled with water, some others are filled with soft drinks. You have 1 liter bottles, half-liter bottles, different sizes, different products inside, but eventually those bottles are all PET bottles and they respond to the same technical characteristic. In such a case, then you can draw a single declaration of conformity because the description and the intended use of that packaging will be the same regardless of the size of the packaging or the product that is inside. Whereas with, for example, the shrink wraps, the pallets, or the bags that you were mentioning earlier, those are different types of packaging, so they have to be subject to their own specific documentation.
That's quite clear. Okay, so we may take
ขออนุ
like
ญาตถามขยายความหน่อยได้ไหมครับผม
ครับคุณทวินครับเชิญเลยครับ
ผมทวินอีกครั้งนะครับ คือบรรจุภัณฑ์เม็ดพลาสติกอะครับเราใส่ลงในถุงnormal bag เนาะที่เป็นขนาด25กิโลกับถุง big bag ที่เป็นขนาด750กิโลถุงประเภทนี้ครับมันมีจะทาง PPWR เนี่ยครับจัดถุงประเภทนี้เป็นถุงบรรจุภัณฑ์ประเภท cell packaging หรือ transport packaging เพราะเนื่องจากว่ามันมี requirement อันนึงนะครับเรื่องว่า recyclability ที่ต้อง declare แล้วก็ต้องมีคุณสมบัติที่ต่างกันด้วยถ้าเป็น cell packaging มันต้องมีคุณสมบัติในการเอาไปรีไซเคิลแล้วก็มีการใช้วัสดุรีไซเคิลคอนเทนต์ในปริมาณอะไร 30% อะไรอย่างนี้เป็นต้นนะครับแต่ถ้าเป็น transport recyclability อาจจะต้องดูหรือเปล่าแล้วก็แต่ถ้า recycle content อาจจะต้องดูไม่ดูหรืออะไรอย่างเงี้ยครับผมจำรายละเอียดไม่ได้ครับสอง requirement เนี่ยจะไม่เหมือนกันก็เลยอยากจะถามว่าถุง normal bag 25 kg กับถุง big bag เนี้ยทั้ง2ตัวนี้จัดว่าเป็น transport packaging ไหมครับหรือมันเป็นคนละแบบอันนึงเป็นเซลล์อีกอันนึงเป็น transport packaging ครับจะได้เขียนไอตัว DLC ให้ถูกต้องด้วยแล้วก็จะได้พัฒนา packaging ของเราให้ตรงตามกฎข้อกำหน
ข
ด
ออนุญาตช่วย
recyclability กับ recycle content
ขออนุญาต
ครับ
ช่วยถามให้ได้ไหม
ครับ
คะ
อาจารย์ครับ
ค่ะ
ครับ
PPWR ให้การยกเว้นการทำ recyclability สำหรับบรรจุภัณฑ์ชนิด textile ชนิดสิ่งทอแต่ยกเว้นเฉพาะ cell packaging ทีนี้มันก็มีประเด็นว่าไอ้ถุงใส่ไอ้ big bag เนี่ยที่ส่งไปขายเนี่ยค่ะทั้งถุงทั้งหูหิ้วเนี่ยมันเป็นcell packaging หรือว่า transport packaging เพราะว่าถ้ามันเป็น transport packaging เนี่ยก็จะไม่ได้รับการยกเว้นก็จะมี recyclability แต่ถ้ามันเป็น cell packaging มันก็ยังถือว่าเป็นcell packaging เป็น packaging ที่ได้รับการยกเว้นประมาณนี้ค่ะ
Okay, yes. Sevrine, do you get the questions?
Thanks a lot, and thank you for already providing some clarities. If I understood the question well, so whether sales or transport packaging, both types of packaging are subject to the different requirements. So you were mentioning recycled content, recyclability. They are subject both to those requirements. It's just depending on the polymer that's used. There might be different targets for recycled content, and indeed. as your expert mentioned, for recyclability, there are some derogations for certain types of materials. Textile was mentioned. And then to understand if that was part of your question, whether what is a sales packaging or a transport packaging, you do have some definitions provided in Article 3 that are quite useful. And indeed, it's important to understand the difference because typically transport packaging are subject to some reuse targets within the union. So it is key to understand that nuance. I hope that answered the question.
โอเคครับเนื่องจากเรามีเวลาจำกัดนะครับผมจะขออีกสัก3คำถามที่ยังยกมืออยู่นะครับคือคุณวิทยาคุณพัชรีวรรณแล้วก็คุณพัฒนานะครับผมสามท่านนะครับเดี๋ยวขอแอดมินเชิญขึ้นเป็นanalyst ได้เลยครับคุณวิทยาครับเชิญเลยครับ
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Thank you everyone to have these sessions. Our company is we are the packaging and we supply to EU markets and all the world. We our name of the company is the NIFAB, and NIFAB is a global company, and we are located in Chonburi, and we are the NIFAB Packaging Thailand. This one. Okay. My question is about the Article 13. Okay. About the substance of concern. The heavy metal is not exceed the 100 ppm. Right now, our customer is asking our company to survey the PPWR about the PFAS and particulate mineral oil and microplastic, also oxo-degradable plastic. I think if my question is if the PPWR regulation from 12th August, we no need to answer to the customer, right? We only declare only 4 substance: lead, cadmium, mercury, and hexavalent chromium. This is a question.
So sorry, I'm just checking that I understood correctly. So your customer is basically asking you about other types of substances beyond those heavy metals provided in Article 5. Is that correct? So they're asking you for technical documentation or proof of compliance with other things than those mandated in Article 5. Is that correct? Yes. So
right.
Yes, I would say your approach is legitimate in the sense that indeed the legal requirement with Article 5 indeed focuses on those substances you mentioned, the heavy metals that are listed in paragraph 4 of Article 5, and then the PFAS. Then obviously there is always a customer relationship, so that is another topic where when it comes to compliance with the PPWR, it is indeed focused on those. And so if they are the manufacturer, they will need to prove compliance with those 2 requirements as part of the PPWR, but not the others.
Yes.
May I add a little bit?
Yes.
ค่ะคือนอกจากกฎหมาย PPWR แล้วเนี่ยกฎหมายฉบับอื่นก็ยังมีผลบังคับใช้อยู่อะค่ะกฎหมาย PPWR ไม่ได้ไป override กฎหมายฉบับอื่นเพราะฉะนั้นกฎหมาย REACH อย่างเงี้ยค่ะมันก็ยังออนอยู่นะคะเพราะฉะนั้นไม่ว่าจะเป็น phthalate หรือว่า microplastic อะไรต่างๆเนี่ยมันก็อยู่ under REACH อยู่ฉะนั้นกฎหมายอื่นเนี่ยก็ยังต้องสอดคล้องอยู่อะค่ะแต่ไม่อยู่ในขอบเขตของ PPWR เท่านั้นเองค่ะ
ครับโอเคครับเดี๋ยวขออีกเป็นท่านสุดท้ายแล้วกันครับพอดีวิทยากรอีกท่านมารอแล้วนะครับขอเป็นคุณพัชรีวรรณได้ไหมครับคุณพัชรีวรรณครับ
Thank you for settling this and this session because we are from Isuzu Group and currently we are exporting some type of accessories to Europe market currently, but mostly we be to Belgium and Italy. We have about 2 questions, which first one I'd like to ask is going to the instructions that from what I understand is that the regulation come into effect on the 12th of August. And now we would like to know that currently some parts are already on the way to the Europe territories. And now we would like to know if all the parts are already currently on the way and they would arrive after the 12th of August. Would that part be toll at the custom even if we have the DoC?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think your question was, what about the packaging or the packaged product indeed that you've already shipped to Europe prior to 12th of August? So the principle on which we work and is usually applied with legislation is that the requirement apply from 12th of August for packaging placed on the market after 12th of August. And so the Commission has provided, in the case of PFAS specifically, a bit more elements then to understand what it means, but there's no retroactive effect of the requirements. So if your packaging have been placed on the market prior to that, normally you should be covered. However, to my knowledge, there are not so many elements when it comes to if your packaging is indeed with the customs on the 12th of August. So for that, I'm happy to double check and look into any available elements after this webinar, but I would also maybe try and approach the customs authorities. But there's no retroactive effect, so anything that is normally coming to Europe prior to 12th of August can continue its life, let's say, on the market and is not subject to the requirements because it was placed on the market before that date.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a last question. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm her colleague. I have a second question from our company regarding DoC. Now, like we are trying to see the templates and prepare the documents for 12 August 2026. And one question about the heavy metal concentration. If we provide the DoC plus technical reports, the technical reports word is a little bit vague and we don't know exactly if there is a standard for the format, or for example, if we provide documents from the QC like COA, like a certificate of analysis, it will be acceptable as document to prove that there is no high concentration of the heavy metals, or it needs to be specific format or specific analysis along with the DoC.
Yes, thank you so much for your question. Actually, regarding this question, we will cover in the following session that our speaker is already here. So may I conclude this session first? And if you have some more questions, we will comply and we will send it to you, Sevrine, if that's okay for answering.
Yes, absolutely.
After the session, we'll send all the answers to your emails later. Yeah.
No problem.
Okay. So for today, thank you so much, Sevrine, and it was very comprehensive. So let's keep in touch.
Happy to, and thanks a lot to all of you for your interest, and it was nice meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye. Okay. So สำหรับช่วงต่อไปนะครับจะขอเรียนเชิญคุณเบอร์คอฟนะครับผมจากบริษัท SGS นะครับมานำเสนอเกี่ยวกับตัว DoC นะครับแล้วก็ technical documentation ในเชิงลึกนะครับผมทั้งตัวอย่างต่างๆ Birkoff, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello everyone here. I'm Birkoff from SGS. So everything is fine. You can see my screen and you can hear my voice, right?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, good. So today our topic is trying to to share some information to help the industrial in the compliance to the PPWR. And just a general introduction that for SGS, we have over 100,000 employees and located around the world, and our SGS works throughout the supply chains, then providing specialized business solutions that improve the quality, safety, productivity, and reduce the risk. In case you do not know about SGS, okay, so our network of over 2,500 offices and laboratories could help our customers to navigate an increasingly regulated world by offering a local expertise on a global scale. So, and then here is a brief introduction of myself. My name is Birkoff Chen, and apart from leading one of the Highlights laboratories in China, I also oversee the global sustainability initiatives for packaging, and with a focus on compliance, testing, and circular design. And my team supports all the brands, retailers, and manufacturers in transitioning to a safer, recyclable, and market-ready packaging. Okay, and I believe you should learn about the PPWR in the period section. So I just give a very brief introduction that in case anything miss, I believe, or any additional information I can give. The EU PPWR is the game changer. We can say that that reflects the trends creating the legal binding obligations for everyone placing the packaging on the EU market. The PPWR replaces the old Directive 94/22 EC, and this is a massive shift from the voluntary targets to mandatory and legally binding regulations. The four key objectives are reducing the overall packaging waste and enforcing 100% recyclability by 2030, and minimizing the hazardous substances like PFAS, and promoting the reuse targets for transport and beverage packaging. And sorry, let's go back. Here are the scope of the PPWR. It applies to all packaging and packaging waste placed on the EU market, and regardless on the material. That means it includes your primary sales packaging on the shelf, secondary group packaging, including, for example, the PDQ or RRP, and tertiary transport packaging like the corrugated cartons and pallets. And if it is packaging, it is regulated in one sentence. So the European Committee has just clarified the definition of packaging. For example, dust bags for shoes and garments are considered packaging and must comply. And however, for the items like tea-light containers, grape-side candle glasses, and the IV bags and syringes are not packaging. And also, an empty beverage cup sold in a retail store is not packaging. But if it is filled at the supermarket refill station, it becomes a surface packaging and falls under the PPWR. Okay. And the PPWR affects everyone in the value chain, including suppliers providing producing materials, manufacturers creating the final packaging, and importers bringing the goods into the EU, and also the final users or brands utilizing the packaging. And crucially, if you place a packaged product on the EU market, you are liable under the Extended Producer Responsibility, EPR. And the EC guidance makes a strict distinction that the manufacturer, in case you are in the role, is that the one who brand is on the packaging and is responsible for the Declaration of Conformity, the DoC, and the producer is the one who makes the packaging available for the first time in a specific member state and pays the EPR fees. And furthermore, for our non-EU clients, simply having a VAT registered branch in the EU is not enough to be an importer, which means you must incorporate a subsidiary or appoint an authorized representative in the EU. Okay, so it's quite I would not say it's complex, but it's because currently the PPWR is a framework. Some of their harmonized standards are not yet released, so it is quite a handicap for the supply chain to understand the entire PPWR framework. So to let you have a general idea, this is the critical dates and compliance roadmap for the PPWR. The regulations enters into force in early 2025 by August 2026. This year, the strict limits on heavy metals and PFAS take effective. And by 2028, the labeling and compostability rules will kick in. And the major milestone is the January 2030. All packaging must be recyclable and meet the PCR targets and comply with the 50% empty space ratio. So here's an overall idea to give you the SGS solutions. You can see this as a cheat sheet. It maps the PPWR articles to the required technical solutions and implementation dates. Whether it's a chemical testing for the Article 5 by 2026 or the design for recycle assessment for the Article 6 by 2030, SGS has the protocols ready to deploy. Okay, so maybe in the future you could contact us if you need. And the most important thing is what we need to do this year, I mean by the August of 2026. So focus on these immediate actions for 2026 that includes that you need to ensure the heavy metals are under the 100 mg per kg and to comply with the PFAS limits for food packaging and eliminate the white space over 50%. And also to ensure your manufacturer and importer traceability labels are legible. And then you also need to draft your technical documentation and prepare your document, your declaration of conformity. And then you need to ensure you are registered in the EU EPR system in case you are an importer or manufacturer. Okay, so to start a PPWR assessment, we need data. We require the material and usage detail, the technical drawings and dimensions and weights, and clear photos, digital outputs to assess the ink coverage, for example, and any existing test reports, and any marketing claims that you plan to make. So this checklist is your starting point to compliance, which means if you are going to prepare your technical file and DoC, you need to gather or you need to collect all these data and documentations from your supply chain. Okay, and apart from the DoC and technical documentation, you need to prepare. If you can't or if you don't have idea how to prepare, that it would be something SGS could support you. And maybe I change to the pointer to laser point. Yeah, this is the the DoC support and also the technical documentation could help. And before that, if you also want to have a overall assessment on how your current status of your packaging against the PPWR requirements, we could perform an assessment report, which means we would create a customized testing protocol for you based on the PPWR requirements and refer to any methodologies and international standards in different for different criteria. For example, the recyclability assessment, the recycled content, the reusability, industrial compostable, bio-based, etc. So we could try to conduct a gap analysis so that you could know in the future what you need to do or what you need to improve your packaging, and what you need to work with your packaging suppliers to achieve the goal. Okay, so for the DoC and technical documentation, I will give more details in the slides. Okay, so this is the an example of the Declaration of Conformity, the DoC, because there is no specific template specified by the PPWR, but the PPWR only give a general idea on what kind of information you need to give. Okay, so the DoC is a legally binding document. So where the manufacturer formally declares that the packaging meets the PPWR requirements, it must include a unique identification of the packaging, the manufacturer's details, and a clear description allowing for traceability. So for if the customs or market surveillance request proof of compliance, this one-page document is the very first thing that they will ask to see. So you can say that this is your passport to the EU market. Okay. Sorry. So regarding how we construct the DoC, we apply a very specific and practical strategy for our clients. If a customer has, for example, has a pallet packaging with many individual boxes in it, we highly recommend grouping the packaging materials of the individual boxes into one DoC group and creating a separate DoC group for the handling and transit materials, like the wooden pallets, the cable ties, and stretched frame, for example. We do this because, for example, the transit materials are universal and often we use across different products. However, if you are shipping an entire PDQ, which means it's a product display quarter, on a pallet, we treat that as a single group. I show it in this example because it will not be split up during the transport to the retail floor. So this is a example of the EU DoC, and you can see we have several critical elements. The first is the identification of the packaging, and then the manufacturer, and if applicable, you need to also mention the manufacturer's authorized representative in the EU. And the third is the objective of the declaration and the description of the packaging. So you need to give a rough description of your packaging. For example, what is that? What packaging? That's the transportation packaging, including different types of packaging components inside. So this is a very rough description. And then moving to the next section of the DoC, we have the declare performance table. This is where you need to clearly state which regulations you are complying and the corresponding values. For example, for the 2026 requirements, you must list the regulation that would be the EU 2025-40, specifically noting that the sum of total lead, cadmium, mercury, and hexavalent chromium content is less than 100 mg per kg. And this section shall clearly link your packaging to the specific legal threshold mandated by the European Commission. Okay. And after the August of 2026, when other criteria or other articles in the PPWR go into enforcement, you also need to include those requirements in this table as well. And finally, the DoC concludes with the signature block. It must state that the Declaration of Performance is issued under the sole responsibility of the manufacturer identified in point 2, and it requires the name, the function, the place, the date, and the date of issue, and a physical or digital signature of the authorized representative. I cannot stress enough that signing this document carries legal weight. You must have the technical evidence to back up this signature, which brings us to the next critical deliverable, which is the technical documentation, which means you are primarily to deliver the DoC to the customs. The DoC is just a one-page paper. You just need to declare what is packaging products and what is covered by this DoC, and also your results of the heavy metals, and also you need to put your signature. It's easy, but you have to bear your legal responsibility as long as you sign this DoC. So if you are not sure about your packaging, if it complies with the PPWR, you need support. So that's the technical documentation. The technical documentation would be a little bit more complex, and you need to work very closely with your packaging suppliers to gather all different substances together. Okay, so the technical documentation, or we call a TD, is the extensive evidence behind. So the NS 8 for the PPWR mandates that this file shall be kept for 10 years after the packaging is placed on the market. As you can see from this overview, it is a highly detailed and multi-page document. It compiles all the conceptual designs, the manufacturer drawings, the materials specifications, and the actual test report. If the DoC is your passport, the technical documentation is your detailed background track. Okay, and we'll try to break it down by details. So you can see the point 1 is the same, should be the same number as your DoC. Okay, so we break down the packaging into very single components. We tried, and here you can see that the list, the corrugated cardboard box, and even the silica gel desiccant bags inside. For each item, we document the material types like the corrugated paper or silicon dioxide, the exact weight, the dimensions, and the manufacturing drawings. In our grouping strategy mentioned earlier, if these were a PDQ display, all these components from the inner desiccant to the outer display tray would be a catalog together in this single technical file. Okay, the level of the detail required is quite exhaustive. We continually stain the components like the corrugated filler, strips, and cover plates. And we need to notice that we don't just list the material. We also need to detail the specifications like such as the 5-layer B flute, 7 millimeters thickness, brownish yellow, 5 grams. And we also document the conceptual design purpose. For example, noting that the filler strips are used to fill the gaps inside the packaging box to prevent the product from shaking. This proves to the authorities that every piece of the material has a functional purpose, which is vital for the packaging minimization requirements as well. Okay, let's be quick. Go on. We need to list all the materials, and even the smallest accessories are very important. And here we have the document, the self-adhesive paper labels, etc. And we continue, including the pallets we use. We need to give the details. And also the PP packing tape, any metal components, for example, the packing barcodes, and also the stretch film, the adhesive paper, the labeling, etc., the staple. Okay, and then we go to the core compliance verification, that the section 5 of the technical documentation is the harmonized standards applied. Here we need to clearly address the Article 5, the substances of concern. We reference the specific, for example, the HS test report, in this case, the report number, blah, 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 and which proves that the sum of lead, cadmium, mercury, and hexavalent chromium across all packaging components is below the legal limits and resulting in a pass. Okay, this is quite important. And this is undeniable laboratory evidence that validates the claim made on your Declaration of Conformity. So I'm trying to reflect one of the questions of the panel asked previously, that if that sufficient, if only the COA or just a declaration to be a supporting document, I would say it is not enough if you are compiling the technical file, because you need some best or third-party documentations to support your conclusion. So your COA is not enough, I would say. Okay, and go further deep down. We then address the other article, for example, the Article 7 or minimum recycled content. We'll calculate the exact percentage of plastic parts. And in this example, the plastic bags, the tapes, the stretch film represent about 3.1% of the total weight. And for Article 10 on the packaging minimization, we calculate the void ratio. And here the void ratio is calculated 8.7%, which is well below the mandatory 50% limit. And we also document the exact mathematical formulas used to arrive at this number and providing a total transparency to any reviewing authority. And the technical documentation concludes with a summary of the total weights by material category. For example, 10.09 kg of paper, 15 kg of wood, and 0.51 kg of metal. And we try to summarize the volume calculations for both the sales packaging and the transportation packaging to justify the void ratio. Okay, and finally, the document is signed and dated by the manufacturer, and with this comprehensive file in hand, you are fully prepared to demonstrate the PPWR compliance to your EU buyers and also the customs officials. Okay, so here I will give you some baseline design recommendations. For example, for plastic, you should use mono materials that are easy to separate. For paper, ensure it is easy to de-ink with minimal lamination. For metal, you need to ensure the plastic accessories are easily removable. And for glass, you should avoid hard to separate coatings and ensure the closures are detachable. So maybe I have some more case study, but I'm not sure if the time allows.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So
So
like we are now like running out of time. Maybe could you wrap up in 15 minutes? But I think this part is very important, and our participants would definitely like to learn about it. Can we extend a little bit, like 15 minutes?
Okay, sure, sure.
And then 15 minutes for Q&A. So we'll finish in 30 minutes.
Okay, okay. So
okay, thank you.
yeah.
1 second. I think you try to open your camera, but like you have the closed. You have the lid covered your camera. You wanna turn it on or something?
I'm not sure, because as long as I turn it on, maybe it takes my bandwidth. I'm not sure if my presentation goes well.
Okay, that's okay. We can do it like this. Okay, please continue. Thank you.
Yeah. And in this case study, for the transport packaging, we focus on the material recyclability and chemical compliance. And we try to meet the under 50% oil space rule. So we also perform the ESTA 3A transit testing, and this is because that if you remove 20% of your corrugated board to meet the PPWR, how do you know your product will survive the courier network? So we simulate the supply chain. For example, the ribation, the drop, the compression, to find the perfect balance between the PPWR compliance and product integrity. Okay. And for paper carrying bags used in retail, our test plan includes the heavy metals in PFAS screening. If there is a food contact, and we assess the recyclability via the SEPI and the EN 3430 to ensure the easy de-inking. And finally, we perform the tear burst and dynamic drop testing to ensure the material minimization doesn't ruin the functionality. And the third case is for the cosmetic PP and PE containers. For this case, we verify the rich HVAC and heavy metals, and we validate the PCR, the post-consumer recycle claims, using the GLS or RCS certification, and we ensure the design is monomaterial for recyclability, and we use the fatigue and drop testing to validate the lightweighting, that the lightweighting the plastic still meets the consumer's usage life cycle. And the last case would be the plastic turnover boxes used in logistics. We test for heavy metals and verify recyclability, and crucially, because these are reusable, we validate the reusability by documenting the closed loop rotation process, tracking mechanisms, and performing ribation and compression testing to ensure the durability over time. That's the final case for the tea and coffee bags. Finally, the permeable tea and coffee bags, while exempted from the Article 6 recyclability, we must be industrially compostable under the Article 9. We test this according to the EN 13442 and screen for the PFAS and heavy metals, and ensuring that they safely break down when deposed and disposed of with the organic products inside. So the EC guidance clearly noted that the permeable tea and coffee bags include paper-based single-serve units, regardless of the material. If it functions as a permeable single-serve unit, it must be designed for the industrial composting by February 12, 2028. Okay, so at SS in general, we help you to move from uncertainty to full compliance with confidence. So apart from testing, any of the technical consultation or certification service or document review are all training, including training, everything we could help you, okay, to go through the compliance of PPWR. And yeah, thank you. And any question? So maybe right now I could turn on my camera. Can you see?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we can see you now. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So we will take like questions from the floor, or we will do it just like last round. I will take like 3 or 4 questions first, and then Birkoff can answer them all together. So currently I see the hands of Kun Thanacha, Kun Kanokporn. Yes, maybe admin, can you move them to be the panelist? Kun Thanacha ครับเชิญเลยนะครับ
Yes.
Yes, please. คุณธนัชชาครับ คุณธนัชชาครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ
กดพูดได้เลยครับ
Yep.
Yeah. Birkoff, maybe you if they ask in Thai, maybe you have to change your channel to English to understand the questions.
Where I can.
The globe bottle there's on the bottom, or if you ask in English then it's fine, but if you go in the bottom of the screen there is the sign.
The corner on your left.
On the corner on the left.
There's the globe.
The circle, the globe. And then you can choose to English to listen to the interpretations in the case. Okay.
Because I need to the interface of my web. Let me
sorry.
check.
Do you know Kun Viparat from STS Thailand? Maybe
Oh, yeah.
She will
Yeah.
help you with this. I will move
Okay,
her
sure,
to the panelist. Okay.
Okay, sure.
คุณวิภารัตน์ช่วยยกมือได้ไหมคะพอดีจะหาทางทีมจะหาตัวยากนิดนึงคุณธนัชชาถามคำถามได้เลยนะคะ
โอเคงั้นขอเปลี่ยนเป็นคุณกนกพรนะครับคุณกนกพรถามได้เลยครับคุณกนกพรเปิดไมค์แล้วสอบถามได้เลยนะครับ
ทำไมเราหาไม่เจอวิภารัตน์
โอเคงั้นขอเป็นท่านใหม่นะครับคุณพัฒนันท์คุณพัชรีวรรณคุณวิทยาคุณวิภารัตน์ครับแอดมินย้ายมาอยู่ใน panelist ได้เลยครับคุณพัฒนันท์เชิญเลยนะครับ
ถ้าเราเป็นผู้ผลิตเครื่องดื่มนะคะแล้วเรามีบรรจุภัณฑ์เป็นขวดแก้วนะคะเรามีฝาเป็นอลูมิเนียมไลเนอร์ PP แล้วก็มีลาเบลพันด้วย OPP หลังจากนั้นเราใส่ชิงแรปแล้วก็ใส่ขาตันคำถามก็คือว่าแต่ละบรรจุภัณฑ์นะคะเนื่องจากมันมีส่วนประกอบค่อนข้างเยอะเนาะเราต้องตรวจสารเคมีอันตรายอะไรบ้างอย่างเงี้ยค่ะอย่างเช่นขวดฝาลาเบลขาตันอย่างเงี้ยค่ะคือมันต้องตรวจทั้งหมดไหม PFAS MOAH Heavy Metal อย่างเงี้ยค่ะมันค่อนข้างเยอะก็เลยสงสัยว่าแต่ละส่วนประกอบอะค่ะเราต้องตรวจอะไรบ้างอย่างเงี้ยค่ะ
Birkoff, did you hear the question in English?
No, because I don't know where I could because my software seems something wrong. I could not see the
Okay, 1 second.
Can you see the three dots? The three dots on under the panels? The three horizontal dots on your software.
Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Oh yeah, right now I got it.
You find it?
Yeah, right now I got it. Okay, so.
Okay. ขอล่ามช่วยแปลอีกทีได้ไหมครับ
Yes, I can hear you.
ค่ะเป็นผู้ผลิตเครื่องดื่มนะคะบรรจุภัณฑ์ก็จะประกอบด้วยขวดแก้วฝาอลูมีไลเนอร์ PP นะคะแล้วพันลาเบลนะคะเป็น OPP เนาะซึ่งตอนพันลาเบลก็จะมีกาวด้วยนะคะแล้วเราก็บรรจุเป็นมัลติชิ้นแบบแพ็ค6แล้วก็ใส่ขาตั้นถ้าเป็นลักษณะนี้ค่ะหัวข้อ chemical compliance เราต้องตรวจแต่ละบรรจุภัณฑ์นะคะเราต้องตรวจครบหรือไม่คืออย่างเช่นต้องตรวจ PFAS ทุกตัวทุกบรรจุภัณฑ์ไหม bisphenol A rich heavy metal อย่างเงี้ยค่ะ mineral oil เนื่องจากมันมีหลายส่วนประกอบก็เลยสงสัยอะค่ะ
Yes. You need to test, for example, the heavy metal, the lead, cadmium, mercury, and hexavalent chromium are applicable or are required for all types of packaging, including food packaging and non-food packaging. But PFAS, the requirement is only for food contact packaging, which means only the packaging directly comes into contact with the food need to comply with the PFAS requirement. So yes, it is quite stringent, because especially for the food packaging, because at this moment, for PFAS, you need to conduct total foreign testing first. That's a screening test. If you have a result under 50 ppm, that according to the latest guidance from the PPWR committee, you could consider to be a pass. But if you exceed that limit, you have to go through the target PFAS as well.
โอเคครับ
สำหรับขวดแก้วต้องตรวจ PFAS ไหมคะ
For the glass bottles, if you confirm there's no additional coating on it, I can only say that the glass has a very, very low risk containing PFAS. As you know that during the manufacture of a glass, you need to achieve to a temperature over 800 Celsius degrees, and at such a high temperature, all the PFAS has been burned out. But for the PFAS,
สำ
maybe
หรับตัว
especially
ขาตั้น
sorry,
นะคะเราต้องตรวจอะไรบ้างคะ
especially for the coatings and plastic materials, it would be high risk of PFAS.
โอเคนะครับได้ครับก็
ใช่ค่ะตรวจ
ขอบ
ต้อ
คุ
ง
ณ
ตรว
นะ
จ
ครั
อะ
บ
ไร
ขาตั้งใช่ไหมครับ
For cartons, you need to test for the heavy metals only, because that's the packaging not directly coming into contact with food.
โอเคครับผมลำดับต่อไปขอเชิญคุณพัชรีวรรณกับคุณวิทยานะครับ So Birkoff will take like a couple of questions first, 2 questions first, and then you can answer both of them altogether.
Hello again. Sorry, we are the one who asked earlier about the question about COA, if it's enough as a technical documents. So let me just focus on our question on our sector or industry. We are not related to the food industry, so we don't have any package contact directly with the food. So we want just to focus on the DoC and the technical reports that need to be attached to the DoC. So my question again, if COA and the other like certificates or tests are not enough as a proof of technical documentation, in this short time before 12 August 2026, I'm not talking about recycled materials or other steps of the regulation, just the deadline, the first one for the COA and for the technical documentation. We are manufacturer and we have packaging suppliers. What documents or should we ask them to provide quickly in this short time to follow the regulation?
Yes. Sorry, for this case, to be honest, the first thing, as I mentioned, the first thing you need to provide to the customs of authorities is the DoC, which means if you are confident that your packaging suppliers are supplying you everything without meeting the heavy metals and PFAS requirements, you could simply sign the DoC, and you could take the time. Still, you could take the time to ask your supplier to send the samples to the lab for the heavy metal and PFAS testing, which means because as long as the authority they ask for further details information, after you submitted the DoC, you will have 10 days. You have 10 days to submit the technical documentation to the authority. And in the technical documentation, apart from the COA of other supporting document, you also need to provide a test report. Yes, you need to hurry up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you need to hurry up นะครับ โอเค ต่อไปครับ ขอเชิญคุณกนกพรครับผม
โทษค่ะ คุณวิทยาก่อนค่ะ เมื่อกี้คุณวิทยา
Yes. Thank you.
ค่ะเชิญ
Yep.
ค่ะ
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My question is very simple. The EU PPWR recycled content requirement on 2030 is the exceed the 35% or the other plastic packaging, right? And then how the you mentioned about from the SGS about the GRS and RCS certifications. How to declare the PCR plastic or the PIR plastic? Yes, this is my questions.
Well, yes, the PPWR requires the recycled content to be PCR, not PIR. I believe that
Yes.
For the GRS and RCS, they do in the TC. I mean, in the transition report, they should mention that the PCR content.
No.
Oh, so in this case, maybe you need to rely on other approach to demonstrate that your recycled content refers to the PCR recycled content. And for example, you need to conduct a factory audit very similar to the GRS or RCS. For example, the SGS, we have a service called the recycled content green mark, and that's the service. We also need to conduct the factory audit. We go into the lab. We go into the factory to review the purchase invoice and as well as the manufacturer production line and also the output of the products, and also we could calculate the recycled content, and that we would identify in the mark and in the certificate that the recycled content is PCR recycle or PIR.
Yes, and yes, continue questions about how to define the PCR in terms of the PPWR regulation.
You mean the? Sorry, could you repeat?
My question is, could you tell me about the PCR? Okay. Related to the PPWR regulation, is identify how to define this is the PCR or PIR plastic.
That's we need to check. We need to check the entire recycling process. At this time, for example, when we conduct the audit, we will check from the recycler, which means the recycler need to purchase something from the waste collector or from other collectors. That the original input of the recycled material is the post-consumer product, not the post-industrial products, because only this way we could identify between the PIR and PCR.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Thank
Yes.
you for your
Yeah.
answer. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if คุณวิภารัตน์อยากจะถามอยู่ไหมครับวันนี้พี่เห็นอยู่ใน list
คุณวิภารัตน์เป็นSGS Thailand ค่ะจะมีคุณกนกพรนะคะที่ยังยกมืออยู่ตอนนี้อยู่ใน panel แล้วนะคะ คุณกนกพรเปิดไมค์ถามได้เลยค่ะไม่ได้ยินเสียงค่ะไม่ได้ยินเสียงเลยค่ะ
ได้ยินไหมคะ
ตอนนี้ได้ยินแล้วค่ะ
จะรบกวนสอบถามเกี่ยวกับDoC อะค่ะที่มันจะอยู่ใน Annex 8อะค่ะก็คือจะมีระบุว่า representative อะค่ะอันเนี้ยค่ะด้วยความที่บริษัทเราอะค่ะอยู่ในประเทศไทยอันเนี้ยมันจำเป็นไหมว่าจะต้องเป็นเจ้าหน้าที่ EU authorize ของ EU เท่านั้นในการที่จะระบุอยู่ใน DoC อะค่ะ
Oh, yes. 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 You need someone to represent you. But that's not in the DoC. That's another thing. For example, it is under the manufacturer obligations that you need to register in the EPR, so that you need a representative. And for the technical documentation, we do suggest you to have the address and EU representative in the DoC, so that the custom authorities can find or can identify those who take the responsibility to the packaging material. So that's why in the technical documentation, you could use your address in Thailand, or you could use your address and your company name in Thailand. But you know, who the question is, who should prepare the DoC? That's the importer and the manufacturer. And the importer and manufacturer shall be someone have the registration in the EU, which means the final DoC and technical documentation to be submitted to the EU authorities should have the EU address. And as a manufacturer, you could ask your supply chain, you could ask your upstream supply chain to provide the same DoC and same technical documentation to you, and you could incorporate such declaration or test report into your technical documentation, not necessarily to have the EU address, but for you as the importer or as the manufacturer, you have to use the EU address. So do I answer your question?
โอเคค่ะขอบคุณมากค่ะ
โอเคครับจริงๆหมดเวลาแล้วนะครับประมาณเที่ยงแล้วนะครับก็สำหรับท่านที่ต้องการจะถามเพิ่มนะครับอาจจะขอให้ถามมาในแชทนะครับเดี๋ยวเราจะรวบรวมข้อมูลนะครับสอบถามจาก Birkoff นะครับแล้วก็อาจจะตอบท่านไปทีหลังนะครับ So Birkoff, I think is now the end of the webinar. So thank you very much for joining us today, and and hope like we can continue our work together with SGS, our good partner. So thank you for today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
ครับช่วงสุดท้ายนะครับก่อนเราจะปิดนะครับผมทาง MTech นะครับอยากจะนำเสนอกิจกรรมต่อไปนะครับรวมถึงตัว PPWR Consortium ด้วยนะครับเดี๋ยวขอเชิญทาง MTech ได้เลยครับ
ค่ะก็วิชุดานะคะเป็นตัวแทน MTech นะคะก็สำหรับวันนี้เราเห็นว่ามีประเด็นคำถามค่อนข้างเยอะนะคะแล้วเราก็คิดว่าเวลาอาจจะไม่เพียงพอนะในการไขข้อข้องใจแล้วเราก็เรียกว่าโค้งสุดท้ายแล้วนะคะเราก็เลยมีแพลนกันนะคะว่าจะจัดupcoming event นะคะเป็นเว็บบินาร์ที่จะมาตอบคำถามเหมือนไลฟ์สดนะคะเป็นไขข้อข้องใจ PPWR เราวางแผนกันไว้วันที่3 สิงหานะคะแต่ว่าในระหว่างนี้นะคะประเด็นคำถามที่มีนะคะก็สามารถที่จะส่งให้กับทีมงานล่วงหน้าได้คือที่อยู่ในแชทวันนี้ก็จะไม่ได้หายไปไหนนะคะเพราะว่าเราก็เรคคอร์ดไว้แล้วก็ที่เรคคอร์ดวันนี้ค่ะก็จะทำเป็นตัววิดีโอนะคะเพื่อให้กลับมาสามารถดูย้อนหลังได้นะคะสำหรับท่านที่วันนี้อาจจะยังไม่ได้คำตอบหรือว่ากลับไปตกผลึกแล้วมีคำถามที่อยากจะถามต่ออยากให้เราไขข้อข้องใจก็ส่งคำถามอันนี้มาได้นะคะมาที่ MTech นะคะตามลิงก์นี้นะคะเราจะมีการส่งตามทุกท่านไปนะคะส่วนอีกส่วนหนึ่งนะคะหลายๆท่านอาจจะมองว่าเอ๊ะแล้วจะติดตามเกี่ยวกับเรื่อง PPWR ได้ยังไงคะก็เลยอยากจะแนะนำว่าในตอนนี้นะคะเรามี Thailand PPWR Consortium แล้วนะคะก็เป็นการร่วมมือกันทั้งหน่วยงานภาครัฐหน่วยงานเอกชนแล้วก็ทุกท่านนะคะที่มีความเกี่ยวข้องเราเองเนี่ยถ้าท่านสนใจนะคะก็สามารถที่จะเข้าร่วมมาเป็นผู้ร่วมก่อการด้วยกันนะคะเป็นตัวตอนนี้เรามี working group ที่ร่วมกันเริ่มทำงานแล้วนะคะทั้ง3ส่วนด้วยกันนะคะเวลาที่เข้าไปจอยในลิงก์นี้ก็สามารถที่จะเลือกได้นะคะว่าอยากจะ participate ในระดับที่เป็นแค่สมาชิกคอยรับเรื่องราวหรือว่าอยากที่จะร่วมเป็นคณะทำงานหรืออยากที่จะร่วมเป็นตัว priority task ที่เราตอนนี้มีอยู่ต้องเร่งเร่งทำออกมาเนี่ยมาช่วยกันออกแบบและดีไซน์นะคะก็สามารถที่จะจอยเข้าทางลิงก์นี้แล้วก็อ่านรายละเอียดนะคะเกี่ยวกับ PPWR Consortium หรือหาข้อมูลต่อได้จากในตัว Google Form ที่เราจะโพสต์ไว้ให้นะคะแล้วก็สำหรับทุกท่านที่สมัครเข้ามาในงานนี้ก็คือยังอยู่ใน mailing list ของสถานทูตแล้วก็ของ MTech นะคะเพราะฉะนั้นมีกิจกรรมอะไรต่อเนื่องนะคะก็จะได้รับข่าวสารสำหรับทุกท่านอยู่แล้วค่ะสำหรับวันนี้ก็ขอบคุณนะคะในโอกาสของ MTech ตอนนี้ด้วยค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
ครับขอบคุณนะครับก็ขอปิดการสัมมนานะครับแล้วก็เดี๋ยวเราจะมีแน่นอนสรุปอะไรนะครับต่างๆวิดีโอคลิปอะไรต่างๆก็ยังไม่หายไปไหนนะครับส่งให้ทุกท่านนะครับแล้วก็มีอะไรสามารถติดตามได้เรื่อยๆนะครับของสถานทูตเองนะครับก็เรามีเว็บไซต์นะครับขอโฆษณานิดหนึ่งนะครับผมครับเดี๋ยวครับก็อยู่ในเว็บไซต์นะครับเป็นbrussels.thaiembassy.org นะครับผมนี่นะครับแล้วก็ในตัวเว็บไซต์เองเนี่ยก็จะมีตัวกรองยุโรปเพื่อไทยก้าวไกลใน EU นะครับก็จะมีบทความแล้วก็ข่าวสั้นนะครับที่เข้าไปเนี่ยท่านสามารถอ่านตัวข้อมูลล่าสุดนะครับเกี่ยวกับนโยบายแล้วก็กฎระเบียบต่างๆของ EU ที่ล่าสุดได้เลยนะครับล่าสุดเราก็เพิ่งลงไปเกี่ยวกับเรื่องกรอบเวลาการบังคับใช้กฎหมายระดับรองของPPWRนะครับท่านสามารถไปตามอ่านได้นะครับว่ากฎหมายอะไรจะมีผลเมื่อไหร่แล้วก็จะได้ติดตามได้ถูกนะครับเรื่อง recyclability เรื่อง recycle content ต่างๆนะครับโอเคครับก็วันนี้นะครับก็ขอบคุณทุกคนนะครับที่อยู่มาจนถึงสุดท้ายนะครับก็ขอบคุณมากครับ
สวัสดีค่ะทุกท่านค่ะแล้วพบกันใหม่ค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ